Week 11 of the fantasy football season. His tight end starts at every matchup this week. New York Jets at the New England Patriots Thursday Night Football. Mason Taylor, it's been an up-and-down rookie season for him. I know Garrett Wilson, he's going to be out 3 to 4 weeks with an injury, and someone's going to have to catch the football over there for New York. But this is a tough matchup at the New England Patriots. If it's Justin Fields, Tyrod Taylor, whoever's going to start for this New York Jet team, I don't believe they're going to go out there and put up a lot of numbers. So Mason Taylor, it's definitely been a decent rookie season for him. But this week with only 2 teams on bye, he's tough to trust. He's a sit. Hunter Henry, a fringe option the last month of the season. Numbers have definitely dropped off for Hunter Henry. And this is a type of offense where Drake May spreads the football around. And also they're big on running the football a lot, obviously, as this New England Patriot team. But even though Hunter Henry, like I said, the numbers for the most part have been non-existent in the last month of the season, this week in a good matchup versus a bad Jet defense, I still have him as a fringe option. Commanders, Miami Dolphins, overseas bowl game, Zach Ertz to start. Terry McLaurin, he's going to miss another game this week. Marcus Mariota and Ertz have a decent rapport. And pretty much this offense, there's not much going on in the running game with Krosky Merritt or Chris Rodriguez. And pretty much it's just Deebo Samuel in the receiving room for this Commander team. So Ertz, he's a big target. Still a good route runner. And Marcus Mariota and Ertz, like I said, they've had some decent games together. In the games Mariota started this season, so he's a start for me. As Ertz, Greg Dulcich a sit. His offense pretty much for Miami's Devon Achane and Jalen Waddle, the only 2 viable options for fantasy football owners. So Dulcich, he had a decent game a few weeks ago versus the Ravens in Week 9. But like I said, he's not a guy you're going to count on. And when Darren Waller was there for this Dolphin team, he was putting up numbers. But once again, obviously, he's injured and out. Los Angeles Chargers at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Rondé Gatson, if he does play in this game, he'll be a start. He left with a knee injury, and he's day-to-day right now. So we'll see how practice reports go as the week goes on. But Gatson, one of the better tight ends already in his rookie season in fantasy football. Big-time threat, can make plays in the middle of the field. Good yard after catch ability. And this week, if he gives it a go with Jacksonville, he's a must-start. And if he's out, Tyler Conklin will be the starting tight end in this ball game for this Los Angeles Charger team. And he's been non-existent all season long, even early in the season when he was the starting tight end. Brenton Strange, there's a good shot he returns this week off the IR, where they're opening up the 21-day window, is this Jacksonville Jaguar team. And they definitely need help in the passing game as Jacksonville. I know Parker Washington, he's playing good football, but Brian Thomas, he hasn't done much all season long. Jacoby Myers, they just traded for him, so it's going to take him some time to pick up the playbook. But if Strange is back this week, we have to see how healthy he really is. So I would still sit him even if he returns. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Buffalo Bills. Cade Otton, he's been one of the best tight ends in fantasy football the last month of the season, and he's coming off a big game with over 17 fantasy points in PPR leagues last week is Cade Otton. So he's a big target, middle of the field. Mike Evans possibly out the whole regular season with a broken collarbone. Chris Godwin, still no timetable for him. So pretty much this offense is Emeka Egbuka, Tez Johnson, and Cade Otton, the top 3 options in the passing game. And when you got a quarterback like Baker Mayfield who spreads that football out and makes plays, it's easy for Otton to go out there and be a good start. Once again, Dawson Knox, he's going to be the starting tight end. It looks like week to week Kincaid is, after he left last week's ball game versus at the Dolphins with a hamstring injury. And Knox, we've seen some decent seasons out of him before. Obviously, Buffalo drafted Dalton Kincaid a few years ago in the NFL draft, but still, I would take a wait-and-see approach. But definitely Dawson Knox, someone to add on the waiver wire, but also someone, to me, at best, is a fringe option this week. Chicago Bears at the Minnesota Vikings. Colston Loveland the last 2 weeks now, he's starting to lock in as that number 1 tight end. He's a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, going even over Tyler Warren, who's been a great stud tight end in his rookie season with Indianapolis. So Loveland last week, another decent game, 9.5 fantasy points. The week before that, he went over 100 yards and had 2 touchdowns in that ball game with the Cincinnati Bengals. And this week in a good matchup versus Minnesota, where we just saw Mark Andrews score a touchdown versus them, he's a start. TJ Hawkinson is sit. Unfortunately, we haven't seen much from TJ Hawkinson, and this offense as a whole is taking a major step back from last season with Sam Darnold in their quarterback to this year with McCarthy and the Carson Wentz combo. So this week, Hawkinson is a sit for me. If he don't score a touchdown, he pretty much has been non-existent all season long for fantasy owners. Green Bay Packers at the New York Giants. So Luke Musgrave, he got the start last week. Obviously, Tucker Kraft out for the season with a torn ACL, and he didn't have much to show for it. 3 catches, 23 yards. So we know Romeo Doubs, he left the game early last week with a chest injury. We'll see if he plays. And Musgrave, I think he's got to step up in this offense if the Packers are going to want to move the football down the field. But this week, even in a slam dunk matchup at a bad Giant defense, I have to see something out of Luke Musgrave to put him in the starting lineup. And I know it's a great matchup, like I said, but last week he couldn't get separation or make plays. Theo Johnson, a fringe option. He's been a touchdown-dependent tight end is Theo Johnson. And we'll see if it's going to be Jackson Dart in there or Russell Wilson at the starting quarterback position for this New York Giant team. So Theo Johnson, it's been a good season for him. He's making plays. Obviously not much in this offense with Neighbors out for the season and Cam Scatterbo. So they're down to Wanda Robinson, Darius Slayton, and Theo Johnson, the top options. But this week in a tough matchup versus a good defense of the Packers, at best to me, he's a fringe option. Houston Texans, Tennessee Titans, Dalton Schultz to start. He's the number 2 option in this passing game behind Nico Collins. Now is Dalton Schultz. And last week, a big game, it was for Dalton Schultz. Him and Davis Mills were locked in, and I know they had to play catch-up with that crazy come-from-behind victory versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Down 19, entering the fourth quarter. So this week in a good one at Tennessee, Schultz to start. Chigga Kwango was hit. Pretty much hasn't done much all season long, unfortunately, is Chigga Kwango. And this whole offense as a whole, none of these guys have really had fantasy value. Ridley hasn't done anything. Tony Pollard, he's done minimum work. So this week, Chigga Kwango was hit. Carolina Panthers, Atlanta Falcons, Jatavian Sanders, he's a sit. The tight end position all season long, once again, has been non-existent for this Panther team. And also as well with them, only Rico Dottle and Tator McMillan, the only 2 players with fantasy value for me. So Javion Sanders, even in a decent matchup at the Falcons, is a sit. Kyle Pitts, he's a start in this ball game. Kyle Pitts, numbers have been up and down once again this season. And Kyle Pitts, I think he was just a great college player, and then he came to the next level here in NFL. I know he's had a lot of quarterbacks. I know a lot of coordinators and head coaches he's had throughout his career, but he's just never been consistent. I know he showed some consistency early in the season, but the last couple weeks, numbers have dropped off, and Kyle Pitts, to me, still a start in this matchup, but I'm not expecting great numbers week in and week out. Cincinnati Bengals at the Steelers, Noah Fant to sit, even though he's been involved in this offense since Mike Gesicki went down with injury, and also involved since obviously Joe Flacco took over at quarterback. But with guys like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins in the receiving room, and Chase Brown out of the backfield, he's that 4th or 5th option, best case scenario. And this week at Pittsburgh, he's a sit. Pat Freiermuth, Jonnu Smith a sits. This offense pretty much has been Jalen Warren, and for the most part, DK Metcalf, even though the last couple weeks, even Metcalf hasn't done much. Freiermuth, he's been a touchdown-dependent tight end this season, where he's only got about 18, 19 catches on the whole season, is Freiermuth. And this week, even in a great matchup versus Cincinnati, he's a sit. And same with Jonnu Smith. He pretty much hasn't done anything all season long, where last season in the second half of the year, he was the best tight end in fantasy football was Jonnu Smith with the Miami Dolphins. But here with Aaron Rodgers, where he don't target the tight end position much, Jonnu Smith, to me, this week, he's a sit. San Francisco 49ers at the Arizona Cardinals. 2 good tight ends going at it in this ball game. George Kittle, he found the end zone last week, and now Kittle, the last 2 out of 3 weeks, getting his legs under him, found the end zone in those ball games. And this week in a matchup where the Cardinal defense really can't stop anyone, he's an easy start. Trey McBride, an easy start as well. One of the best tight ends once again this season in fantasy football. He's a matchup problem. He's locked in with Brissett, and last week he went over 100 yards and found the end zone at Seattle. He's a start. Seattle Seahawks at the Rams. A.J. Bonner a sit. He was off to a good start early in the season, but he was a touchdown-dependent tight end, is A.J. Bonner. And now over the last few weeks, he really hasn't done much. So this week at Los Angeles, he's a sit. Tyler Higbee a sit as well. He's a touchdown-dependent tight end, but he hasn't done much. Seen all season long Matthew Stafford spread that football out, but when you got guys like Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, even though Adams is banged up, and we'll see if he plays in this game, it's going to be tough for other players to go out there and put up some numbers. He's a sit. Kansas City Chiefs at the Denver Broncos. Travis Kelce's playing good football over the last few games. Now coming off a bye week. Big matchup in division between these 2 AFC West rivals. And I think Kelce, he goes out there and has one of his better games of the season, because like I said, he's been playing better football of late. And with a lot of coverage rolling Rashee Rice's way, I think Kelce could slip through a little bit and get some better looks. Evan Ingram a sit. It's been a down year once again for Evan Ingram in his first season with this Denver Bronco team. And pretty much this offense is about running the football, and Cortland Sutton and Troy Franklin, the only 2 guys in the receiving game really having an impact. Baltimore Ravens at the Cleveland Browns. Mark Andrews a start. Yes, he's been a touchdown-dependent tight end, is Mark Andrews, but it's still the number 2 option in this passing game behind Zay Flowers. He could go out there, big red zone threat, like I said. He found the end zone last week at the Minnesota Vikings, and this week in a good matchup at a familiar foe in the division at Cleveland. He's a start. David Njoku, Harold Fanny Jr., this starts for me in this ball game. David Njoku found the end zone last week at the New York Jets, and Njoku, obviously, he didn't get traded at the deadline, even though he is an expiring contract. So this week versus the Ravens, in a game they'll be trailing early and often, and Dylan Gabriel likes targeting the tight end position, he's a start. And same with Harold Fanning Jr. I know Fanning Jr. last week, the numbers weren't great, obviously, versus the New York Jets, and he also wasn't 100% coming off a hamstring injury, but he still had 4 catches, 44 yards. And this week, I think both these tight ends, even though they're on the same team, obviously, are starts. Detroit Lions at the Philadelphia Eagles, Sam Laporta. It's like one good game, one bad game type of pattern it's been all season long for Sam Laporta. We know there's a lot of mouths to feed in this offense, obviously, for this Detroit Lion team. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, the last couple weeks put up numbers. Obviously, the backfield, the Gibbs and Montgomery, both Sam Laporta, one of the better tight ends in the league, and he's a matchup problem. And this week, even in a tougher matchup versus one of the best teams in the league defensively, the Philadelphia Eagles, he would be a start for me. And Dallas Goedert to start last week. He had a decent ball game with Goddard, 4 catches, 43 yards in the victory at the Green Bay Packers, and pretty much him and Devonta Smith were majority of the offense, Philadelphia Eagles. So this week in a matchup where I don't think this line defense is all that great, Dallas Goedert is a start once again. And like I said, he's been one of the more consistent tight ends in fantasy football all season long. Final game of the week to round it out, Dallas Cowboys at the Las Vegas Raiders, Monday Night Football. Jake Ferguson, it's been a great season for him, but now the last 3 weeks since CeeDee Lamb's been back into the lineup, the numbers have dropped off, and rightfully so. When you got CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, and Javonte Williams having big season out of the backfield, it's going to be tough for all these guys to go out there and put up consistent numbers. But Ferguson in a great matchup versus Vegas Raider defense, they can't stop anyone. And I think Ferguson this week bounces back and has a good game, especially coming off the bye as well. And Brock Bowers, speaking of bouncing back, last week only 1 catch, 31 yards, and it's unacceptable, I think, to only target him 4 times in that ball game at Denver. So this week in a great matchup versus a bad Dallas Cowboy defense, even though they get reinforcements where traded for Quinnen Williams, traded for Donovan Wilson, and possibly Overshown returns to the lineup as well. But still, Brock Bowers, after a bad game and a plus matchup this week, he's a must-start tight end. So that's tight end starts in every matchup for Week 11 of the fantasy football season.